Chapter 9. The next important event in my life was my visit to Boston in May 1888. As if it were yesterday, I remember the preparation, the departures with my teacher and my mother, the journey, and finally the arrival in Boston. How different this journey was from the one I had made to Baltimore 2 years before. I was no longer a restless, excitable little creature, requiring the attention of everybody on the train to keep me amused. I sat quietly beside Miss Sullivan, taking in with eager interest all that she told me about what she saw out of the car window. The beautiful Tennessee River, the great cotton fields, the hills and woods, and the crowds of laughing Negroes at the station, who waved to the people of the train and brought delicious candy and popcorn balls through the car. On the seat opposite me sat my big rag doll, Nancy, in a new gingham dress and very fluffed sunbonnet, looking at me out of two big eyes. Sometimes, when I was not absorbed in Miss Sullivan's descriptions, I remembered Nancy's existence and took her up in my arms, but I generally calmed my conscience by making myself believe that she was asleep, as I shall not have occasion to refer to Nancy again. I wish to tell her as I experienced she had soon after our arrival in Boston. She was covered with dirt, the remains of mud pies I had compelled her to eat, although she had never shown any special liking for them. The laundress at the Perkins Institution secretly carried her off to give her a bath. This was too much for poor Nancy. When I next saw her, she was a formless heap of cotton, which I should not have recognized at all except for the two big eyes, which looked out at me reproachfully. When the train at last pulled into the station at Boston, it was as if a beautiful fairy tale had come true. The once upon a time was now the far away country was here. He had certainly arrived at the Perkins Institutions for the Blind when I began to make friends with the little blind children. It delighted me inexpressible to find that they knew the manual alphabet. What joy to talk with other children in my own language. Until then, I had been like a foreigner speaking through an interpreter. In the school where Laura Brickman was taught I was in my own country. It took me some time to appreciate the fact that my new friends were blind. I knew I could not see, but it did not seem possible that all the eager, loving children who gathered round me, enjoying heartily in my frolics, were also blind. I remember the surprise and the pain I felt as I noticed that they placed their hands over mine when I talked to them and they read books with their fingers. Although I had been told this before, and although I understood my own deprivation, yet I had thought vaguely that since they could hurt, they must have a sort of second sight, and I was not prepared to find one child and another, and yet another deprived of the same precious gift. But they were so happy and content that I lost all sense of pain in the pleasure of their companionship. One day spent with the blind children made me feel truly at home in my new environment, and I looked eagerly from the pleasant experience to another. As the days flew slowly by, I could not quite convince myself that there was much work left, for I regret Boston as the beginning and the end of creation. While we were in Boston, we visited Bunker Hill, and there I had my first lesson in history. The story of the brave men who had fought on the spot where we stood excited me greatly. I climbed the monument, counting the steps and wondering as I went higher and yet higher if the soldiers had climbed this great stairway and shot at the enemy on the ground below. The next day we went to Plymouth by water. This was my first trip on the ocean and my first voyage in a steamboat. How full of life and motion it was, but the rumble of the machinery made me think it was thundering, and I began to cry because I feared if it rained, we should not be able to have our picnic out of doors. I was more interested, I think, in the great road on which the pilgrims land than in anything else in Plymouth. I counted it, and perhaps that made the coming of the pilgrims and their toils and great deeds seem more real to me. I have often held in my hand a little model of the Plymouth Road which a kind gentleman gave me at Pilgrim Hall, and I have fingered its curves. The spleen in the center and the elbows figures 80, 1000, 120, and turned over in my mind all that I knew about the wonderful story of the pilgrims. How my child's imagination glowed with the splendor of their enterprise. I idealized them as the brave and most generous men that ever sought at home in a strange land. And I thought they desired the freedom of their beloved men as well as their own. I was keenly surprised and disappointed years later to learn of their acts of persecution that made us tingle with saint, even while we glory in the courage and energy that gave us our country beautiful. Among the many friends I made in Boston were Mr. William Edicott and his daughter. Their kindness to me was the seed from which many pleasant memories had since grown. One day we visited their beautiful home at Beverly Farms. I remember with delight how I went through their rose garden, how their dogs with Leo and little curly, hairy Fritz with long ears came to meet me, and how Nimrod, the swiftest of the horse, poked his nose into my hands for a pet and a lump of sugar. I also remember the beach where for the first time I played in the sand. It was hard, smooth sand, very different from the loose, sharp sand mingled with kelp and shells at Brewster. Mr. Editco told me about the great ships that came sailing by from Boston, bound for Europe. I saw him many times after that, and he was always a good friend to me. Indeed, I was thinking of him when I called Boston the city of kind hearts. Chapter 10. Just before the parking institution closed for the summer, it was arranged that my teacher and I should spend our vacation at Brewster of Cape Cod with our dear friend, Mr. Hopkins. I was delighted, for my mind was full of the prospective joys and of the wonderful stories I had heard about the sea. My most vivid recollection of that summer is the ocean. I had always lived far inland and had never had so much as a whiff of salt air, but I had read in a big book called Our World a description of the ocean which filled me with wonder and an intense longing to touch the mighty sea and feel it roar. So my little heart leapt high with eager excitement when I knew that my wish was at last to be realized. No sooner had been helped into my very suit that I sprang out upon that warm sand and without thought of fear plunged into the cool water. I felt the great billows rock and skin. The buoyant motion of the water filled me with an exquisite, quivering joy. Suddenly my ecstasy gave place to terror, for my foot struck against a rod, and the next instant there was a rush of water over my head. I thrust out my hands to grasp some support. I clutched at the water at the sweat which the waves touched in my face, but all my frantic efforts were in vain. The waves seemed to be playing a game with me, and tossed me from one to another in their wild frolic. It was fearful. The good, firm air had split from my feet, and everything seemed shut out from the strange, all the enveloping element life air, water, and love. At last, however, the seat, as if weary of its new toy, threw me back on the shore, and in another instant I was clasped in my teacher's arms. Oh, the comfort of the long, tender embrace! As soon as I had recovered from my panic sufficiently to say anything, I'm the man who put salt in the water. After I had recovered from my first experience in the water, I threw in great fun to sit on a big rod in my bathing suit and feel wave after wave dash against the rod, sending up a shower of spray which quite covered me. I feel the people railing as the waves threw their ponderous weight against the shore. The whole beach seemed racked by their terrific onset, and the air troubled with their pulsation. The breakers would shoot but to gather themselves for a meager leap, and I clung to the rod, tense, fascinated, as I felt the dash and roar of the rushing sea. I could never stay long enough on the shore. The time of the untamed, fresh and free sea air was like a cool quietude, and the shells and pebbles and the sweet with tiny living creatures attached to it never lost their fascination for me. One day, Miss Sullivan attracted my attention to a strange object which she had captured basking in the shallow water. It was a great horse to create the first one I had ever seen. I felt of him and thought it very strange that he should carry his house on his back. It suddenly occurred to me that he might make a delightful pet, so I seized him by the tail with both hands and carried him home. The feat pleased me highly, as his body was very heavy, and it took all my strength to drag him half a mile. I would not leave Miss Sullivan in peace until she had put the crab in a tree near the wall where I was confident he would be secured. But next morning I went to the tree, and lo, he had disappeared. Nobody knew where he had gone or how he had escaped. My disappointment was bitter at the time, but little by little I came to realize that it was not kind or wise to force this poor dumb creature of his element. And after a while I felt happy in the truth that perhaps he had returned to the sea. Chapter 11. In the afternoon, I returned to my southern home with a heart full of joyous memories. As I recall that visit north, I am filled with wonder at the richness and variety of the experience that clustered about it. It seemed to have been the beginning of the everything. The treasure of a new, beautiful world were laid at my feet, and I took in pleasure and information at every turn. I lived myself into all things. I was never still a moment. My life was as full of motion as those little insects that crowd on world existence into one brief day. I met many people who talked with me by spelling into my hand, and through enjoyed sympathy lived up to meet thought. And behold, a miracle had been wrought. The barren place between my mind and the minds of others blossomed like the rose. I spent the autumn months with my family at our summer cottage on a mountain about 14 miles from Tuscumbia. It was called Fern Quarry because near in there was a limestone quarry long since abandoned. Three frolic some little stream ran through it from springs in the rocks above, leaping here and tumbled there in lauding cascades wherever the rocks tried to bar their way. The open was filled with ferns which completely covered the beds of limestone and in place hid the streams. The rest of the mountain was thickly wooded. Here were great oaks and splendid evergreens, with trunks like mossy pillars. From the branches of winds hung garlands of eve in Aristotle immaculate and permission streets, the odor of which pervaded every nook and corner of the wood, an elusive fragrance something that made the heart glad. In place, the wild muscadine and Cooper Nung vine stretched from tree to tree, making a burst with words, fold and butterflies and buzzing insects. It was delight to lose ourselves in the green hollows of the tangled who in the late afternoon, and to smell to cool, delicious odors that came up from the earth at the close of day. Our cottage was a short of root camp beautifully silhouette of the top of the mountain among oaks and pines. The small rooms were arranged on each side of a long open hall. Round the house was a wide piazza, where the mountain winds blew, sweet with all wood scents. We lived on the piazza most of the time there were worked, ate, and played. At the back door there was a great butternut tree, round which the steps had been built, and in front the tree stood so close that I could touch them and feel the wind shade their branch or the leaves trail downward in the autumn blast. Many visitors came to Fern Quarry. In the evening by the campfire, the men played the cards and while away the hours in told and spurs. They told stories of their wonderful feats with fowl, fish and quadruped, how many wild ducks and turkeys they had shot, what savage true they had caught, and how they had begged the crafty fox out with it the most clever possum and overtaking the fleeced deer, until I thought that sorely the lion, the tiger, the bear, and the rest of the wild tribe will not be able to stand before these wild hunters tomorrow to the chase. Was their good night, should as the circle of merry friends broke up for the night. The men slept in the hall outside of our door, and I could feel the deep breathing of the dogs and the hunters as they lay on their improvised beds. At dawn I was awakened by the smell of coffee, the rattling of gun, and the heavy footsteps of the men as they strode about, promising themselves the greatest loot of the season. I could also feel the stamping of the horse, which they had ridden out from town and hitched under the street, where they stood all night, neighing loudly, impatient to be off. At last the men mounted, and as they say in the old songs, away when the steeds with bridles, when the champions hunters with hark and wild halloo. Later in the morning, we made preparation for a barbecue, and fire was kindled at the bottom for a deep hole in the ground. With sticks were laid crossing at the top, and meat was hung from them and turned on spits. Around the fire squatted negroes, driving away the flies with long branch. The savory odor of the meat made me hungry long before the table were set. When the bustle and excitement of preparation was at its height, the harving party made its appearance strongly in by thoughts and treats. The man hot and weary, the horse covered with foam, and the jaded hounds panting and jetted and dead, and not a single kill. Every man declared that he had seen at least one deer, and that the animal had come very close. But however hotly the dogs might pursue the game, however while the guns might be aimed at the snap of the trigger, there was not a deer in sight. They had been as fortunate as the little boy who said he came very near seeing a rabbit. He sought his tracks. The party soon forgot its disappointment, however, and we sat down, not to venison, but to a tame fish of veal and roast pig. One summer I had my pony at Fern Quarry, and called him my black, and called him Black Beauty, as I just read the book, and he resembled his namesake in every way, from his glossy black coat to the white star on his forehead. I spent many of my happiest hours on his back. Occasionally, when it was quite safe, my teacher would let go to the little rein, and the pony sauntered on or stopped at the sweet wheel to eat grass or nibble the leaves of the trees that grew beside the narrow trail. On morning when I did not care for the ride, my teacher and I would start after breakfast for a ramble in the woods, and allow ourselves to get lost amid the trees and pines, with no road to follow except the paths made by cows and horses. Frequently, we came upon impasse ticket which forced us to take a roundabout way. We always returned to the cottage with a handful of laurel, golden run, friends, and golden swat flowers such as grow only the south. Sometimes I would go my Mildred and my little cousin to garden permissions. I did not eat then, but I loved their fragrance and joined hunting for them in the leaves and grapes. We also went nutting, and I helped them open the chestnut burrs and break the shells of hickory nuts and walnuts, the big, sweet walnuts, and the food on the mountain there was railroad, and the children watched the trains whiz by. Sometimes a terrific whistle brought us to steps, and Mildred told me in great excitement that a cob or a horse had strayed on the track. About a mile distant, there was a trestle spanning a deep gorge. It was very difficult to walk over. The ties were wide apart and so narrow that one felt as if one were walking on ice. I had never crossed it until one day Mildred, Miss Sullivan, and I were lost in the woods and wandered for hours without finding a path. Suddenly Mildred pointed with her little hand and exclaimed, "There is the streslet! There is the streslet!" We would have taken any way rather than this, but it was late and growing road, and the trestle was a short-cut home. I had to feel for the race with my two, but I was not afraid and got and very well until all at once there came a fall puff puff from the distance. I see the train, cried Mildred, and in another minute it would have been upon us had we not climbed down on the crossbrace while it rushed over our heads. I felt the hot breath from the engine on my face, and the smoke and ashes almost shocked us as the train rumbled by. The thread shook and swayed until I thought we should be dashed to the chance below. With the utmost difficulty, we regained the track. Long after that, we reached home and found the cottage empty. The family were all out hunting for us.